Hi, welcome back to my channel and my review for The Crow from 1994. This was directed by Alex Proyas and is an adaptation of a comic book series from the late 80s. So the story for this one is about a couple who the night before their wedding are both brutally murdered by this ruthless gang kind of running riot in this city they live in. And 1 year later after this event, the main character, Eric Draven, who is the Crow, he is resurrected under this law where this Crow will lead him to every single person that was involved in his and his girlfriend's murder in order to kill every single one of them. So I've long been looking forward to my revisit of The Crow. I haven't seen this in absolutely years now, probably since I was about 16. And I was planning to do this as a two-part review series with the new release of The Crow. I have heard the news that apparently that movie is absolutely dire. So I'm not sure yet whether I've got the will to see it, but I didn't want that to derail my plans of watching this original Crow film. So really looking forward to getting into my thoughts on this one today. And the first thing really that strikes me is, even though I think in some ways it's quite a bare bones, it's quite a simple superhero story. It's really just a revenge tale that follows the sort of formula of a lot of movies that came before it. It is really refreshing to see a superhero movie like this now, especially when we are living in a time where every single superhero movie is full to the brim with convoluted plot lines, so much overcomplication, multiverses, all this sort of stuff. And don't get me wrong, once in a while I do like some movies like that have been stuff in, the Marvel, DC, all that sort of stuff that I do enjoy, but it is a breath of fresh air to go back to a simpler time and watch a comic book movie, which was just a lot more straightforward with its plot, that you can follow everything that's going on and just appreciate it for what it is. And I did really enjoy going back to see this movie. Now, I would say it's not quite as good as I remember it being. I think, for anybody who is familiar with this movie, of course, it's got a bit of a legacy now. For the death of the lead actor Brandon Lee, who was tragically killed in an accident involving a prop gun right towards the end of production. They were in the final few scenes of filming and he was unfortunately killed. And the performance is quite iconic, and I think when you watch this movie now, you can't help but think about, what he went through, what happened, and it's kind of created a bit of extra effect to the movie, I want to say, in that, the real life, what happened to him, you can't help but include that story in with what's going on for the events of the film. And there are some kind of emotional moments that I think probably wouldn't be there if he hadn't have been killed when he was. So there is something about this movie that is definitely special to a lot of people. It resonates with a lot of people. It's one that I would definitely not have chosen to try and remake. A studio coming out to try and remake this thing, people would already be going in with raised eyebrows. And the fact that they've done a terrible job with it, apparently, not sure what they were thinking with going back to remake a movie like The Crow. But, going back to this time where it was a very distinct style, this very gothic aesthetic, especially when I saw it at the age that I did, I really, really gelled with it. Loved the style, loved the music, loved the look and the feel of all the characters and everything. And I still really appreciate all those things about it. It's definitely a movie where you feel like everybody involved in the project was really giving it their all. Especially with Brandon Lee as well. I think he gives a great performance here. Obviously, his career was probably about to get a lot bigger after the release of this film. We'll never know where that went now. But he gives a really great performance. He's very likeable in the role. He looks like he's having a lot of fun with it. And I think that's actually what makes the movie quite rewatchable, because it's quite... When you look at the script and everything on paper, it's a very dark story, a lot of dark subject matter. It's harsh, it's pretty brutal, it's very violent. And the main character, again, you don't really get to know him that well. It's really just various scenes of him just taking out people in brutal fashion. But there are small moments throughout where you can see he's having fun with the role. There's lighter moments, there's comedy, there's little things thrown in there which make you really like the character, even though you, as I say, you don't really get to know him as a person. They don't do sort of a deep dive into this character so you get a real feel for who he was. But there are just little moments all throughout which just keep a lighter tone to what is really a very, very dark film. And I really like that, and I think maybe somebody else wouldn't have been able to bring to the role what Brandon Lee did. And I actually think there's a particular scene in this which I think The Dark Knight really owes credit to. You know, I was thinking about the scene in The Dark Knight where you first have Heath Ledger as the Joker. I mean, so many similarities now about these movies when you think about it. But, you know, Heath Ledger, when he walks into the room in front of all of the gang who are kind of discussing their moving forward plan, and he kind of stands up to them all, establishes that he's the big dog in the room. And that's literally a scene straight out of The Crow. I couldn't believe that. I'd forgotten all about that scene, but they're so identical. And it basically plays out exactly the same. So I haven't actually read anything about this to see if people have made that comparison before. But yeah, couldn't help but notice that the movie The Dark Knight definitely owes something to The Crow and the performance here by Brandon Lee. Whilst I don't think they're really doing anything deep and complex with the characters, I do think that everybody that we get to meet throughout this story, like some of the side characters you've got with the little girl who knew the couple before they were killed, you've got the police detective played by Ernie Hudson as well, both very likeable characters. And even though they don't particularly delve into them, they just give them a little story to go along with everything that's going on. They're definitely likeable. You know, you really have fun with them on the scenes that they get to come in. There's a couple of emotional moments between her and Eric Draven. There's some nice moments in there, even though I don't think they're probably maybe doing as much with the characters as I would have liked. And I do have a few issues with the villains, but I did really like Michael Wincott. You know, he was just born to play villains, just the way this guy looks and sounds with his voice. He's a nice presence throughout the film. Whenever he's on scene, they've got all the metal music playing in the background, and, you know, it works. Again, it definitely fits the style of the movie. He was a great villain here. The only thing I don't particularly like is all of his cronies. You know, I feel like even though this movie feels very 90s to me, there's still that little bit of late 80s thing going on. If you think of movies like RoboCop, Predator 2, all that sort of stuff, where you've got extremely over-the-top villains where, you know, like here they're kind of literally raping and killing people whilst cackling as they do it together, and it just seems so over the top for me. So some of that stuff is a little bit off-putting to me now. It's just too ridiculous, and it feels sometimes a little bit out of place in the movie that it's in, when this is trying to be a bit more dark, a bit more grounded. I didn't really gel with all of that, but as far as a lead villain with Michael Wincott, the final confrontation, I really quite enjoyed that. I think you can definitely tell there were compromises that had to be made at the end of the movie. Obviously nobody's fault. The fact that Brandon Lee did die, the movie ends quite abruptly, I would say. You know, they probably wanted to do a few more scenes to really nicely conclude out this story, and I think it feels rushed in some ways. Although I do really love the scene where he's lying on the grave and he kind of has the vision of him with his girlfriend laying over him, and they have that kiss together. And again, you can't help but separate the story of what happened to Brandon Lee there. I do feel like it's quite an emotional moment, and I think that's probably what makes, again, the movie quite iconic for those kind of final scenes and how we remember the story, him and everything else. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. I had a good time watching this again. I could definitely understand people that don't particularly vibe with the film. Like, I really wouldn't be that shocked if some people didn't like it, just because I do think the style is very distinct, you know, that kind of gothic feel about it. I can definitely imagine some people not entirely enjoying the film, but for me it works. I enjoy the story, I enjoy the characters, it's very rewatchable for me, but definitely not one of my favourites. So I think I'm going to give this one a 3.5 out of 5 rating. But please do let me know down in the comments what you think of The Crow from 1994, if you have seen it before. As I say, I will put up a review for the new one if I do get round to seeing it. I feel like maybe I should give it a chance. You know, people do get very overexcited about the hate of some new films that come out. I've seen thumbnails already like worst film of the year, and I highly doubt it's that, but I may go and see it, and if I do, I will give you my thoughts early next week. But of course, leave all your thoughts down below for this original Crow. Thanks so much for watching, and please do consider as well subscribing to the channel if you've been enjoying my content. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.